My name is Henry Caldwell, and I will never forget the sound beneath the floor. It all started when I moved into the old farmhouse just outside town. It was secluded, tucked away among the trees, with a view of the river in the distance. The price was right, and though the house was a little run down, I didn't mind. I was looking for peace, a place to escape the noise of the city. The first few days were uneventful. I spent my time cleaning, fixing up the house, and unpacking. It wasn't until I heard the sound that I began to question my decision. It was faint at first, just a soft scratching, like nails on wood. I assumed it was some kind of rodent, maybe a mouse or squirrel, trying to find its way into the house. It wasn't unusual for older homes to have pests, so I didn't think much of it. But the sound grew louder, more persistent, as the days passed, and then it started to change. The scratching became tapping, steady, rhythmic, and then it was something else, a low, guttural thud. I couldn't tell if it was coming from the walls or beneath the floorboards. But it was there, every night, always at the same time, just as I was about to fall asleep. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling, but the sound continued, louder each night, until it felt like something was trying to break free from beneath the floor. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the center of the living room, where the sound seemed to be coming from the hardest. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and I could feel a chill in the air. Despite the warmth of the house, I shined the flashlight down at the floor and saw something that made my blood run cold, a small crack in the wood, just large enough for something to fit through. I bent down, my heart racing, and peered into the crack. At first I saw nothing but darkness, but then I saw a pair of eyes. Two tiny, glowing eyes staring back at me from beneath the floor. I jumped back, my breath catching in my throat. The eyes blinked, and I swear I saw a faint smile form on the shadowed face beneath. I scrambled to my feet, panic flooding my chest. I didn't know what it was, whether it was an animal or something far worse. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to get out of the house. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The handle was jammed, as though something inside had locked it. I turned and looked back at the floor, where the crack was now wider, and the tapping sound had started again, louder this time. The eyes in the floor glowed brighter, their smile widening. A low, rasping voice came from beneath the boards, its tone slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The floor beneath me creaked, and I could feel the floorboards shifting, as though something was moving underneath. The eyes were getting closer now, and I could see something else, a hand, reaching up through the crack, its fingers long and twisted, like something not quite human. I backed away, my mind racing for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. The house felt alive, closing in on me from all sides, and then, just as quickly as it had started, everything went silent. The eyes disappeared, the hand withdrew, and the tapping ceased. The floorboards returned to their usual creak, and the house settled into an eerie stillness. I ran out of the house that night, never to return. The door opened easily once I reached it, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. I don't know what it was, or what lived beneath the floor of that farmhouse, but I know one thing: it's still there, waiting. And if you ever find yourself in that part of the woods, I advise you to stay far, far away from that house, because something beneath the floor is always listening, always waiting for someone else to come and hear the sound. My name is Alexander Pierce, and I regret ever picking up that photograph. It was a normal Saturday afternoon when I discovered it. I was browsing through a small antique shop on the outskirts of town, looking for something interesting to add to my collection of vintage photographs. The shop was dimly lit, cluttered with old trinkets and dusty furniture. Nothing extraordinary, just the kind of place where you could spend hours sifting through forgotten treasures. And then I found it, a black and white photograph, crammed between two old books. The edges were frayed, and the image was slightly faded, but it caught my eye. It was a picture of a family, a father, a mother, and two children, standing outside a house I didn't recognize. They looked ordinary enough, dressed in clothes from the early 1900s, their faces smiling, though something about the expression on the father's face made me feel uneasy. His smile seemed a little too wide, his eyes too intense. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to buy it. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with a stern face, watched me as I handed over the money. "Be careful with that one," she warned, her voice low. "It's been known to bring strange things." I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to make her shop seem more mysterious to the tourists. I had no reason to believe in anything supernatural. When I got home, I set the photograph on my desk and examined it closely. The house in the background seemed familiar in a strange way, as though I had seen it before in a dream, but I couldn't place it. I shook my head, dismissing the thought. The next morning, when I woke up, the photograph was different. The faces of the family in the picture had changed. The mother's face was now expressionless, her eyes hollow. The children were no longer smiling, their faces twisted in terror. But it was the father that disturbed me the most. His smile was gone, replaced with a sinister grin, his eyes black voids staring directly at me. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I wasn't imagining things. Something had happened to the photograph overnight. I rushed to the antique shop, hoping to find the woman who had sold it to me. But when I arrived, the shop was gone. There was nothing but an empty storefront, the windows boarded up. Confused and unsettled, I returned home. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The photograph seemed to call to me, its eerie gaze lingering in the corner of my eye, even when I turned my head. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the family's faces twisted, contorted, and full of fear. And then came the dreams. At first, they were vague, fleeting. A figure in the shadows, a voice whispering my name. But over time, the dreams became clearer. I would stand outside the house from the photograph, the door creaking open in front of me. The family would be waiting inside, their faces twisted, in agony, pleading for me to help them. But every time I reached out to them, they would vanish, leaving only the father behind, standing in the doorway, grinning. One night I found myself in the dream again, standing before the house. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with old, decaying furniture. The family was there, but they weren't the same. Their bodies were skeletal, their eyes hollow and dark, and they were whispering, chanting something I couldn't understand. The father was waiting for me. He stood at the foot of the stairs, his grin wider now, his eyes gleaming with malice. He didn't speak, but I could feel him reaching out, pulling me toward him, and then, before I could move, the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The family advanced on me, their hands outstretched, their whispers growing louder, and the father's voice, low and cold, echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have taken it." I woke up, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat. The photograph was on my desk, but this time it was different. The family's faces had completely changed. There was no sign of the mother or children anymore. Only the father, standing alone, his grin widening with every passing second. I've tried to burn the photograph, rip it apart, but it always comes back. It's like it has a life of its own, and no matter where I go, I can feel it watching me. The worst part is, I think the family in the photograph isn't gone. They're still there, and they're still waiting for someone to take their place. My name is Robert McKinley, and I never should have stared into that mirror. I was always a practical man, one who believed in logic and science, ghosts, spirits, all of that, I never gave it a second thought, until the day I bought that mirror. Was a rare antique, a beautifully carved frame of dark oak, its glass almost too perfect to be old. The shopkeeper assured me it had a history, something about it being passed down through generations, but he wouldn't say much more. I should have walked away then, but I was intrigued. The price was reasonable, so I brought it home and hung it in my bedroom. The first few days were uneventful. The mirror was just a mirror reflecting my image, my room. I'd glance at it occasionally, but nothing stood out. Then, one night, as I brushed my teeth before bed, I noticed something. For a split second, I saw a figure in the reflection. A man, tall, dark-haired, standing behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, but there was no one there, just my empty bedroom. I laughed nervously, dismissing it as my imagination, but the feeling lingered. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched, especially when I passed by the mirror. It was like there was something in the reflection, just beyond the glass, waiting. I tried to ignore it, but over the next few nights, things grew worse. The figure became clearer, more distinct. His face was pale, gaunt, and his eyes were dark pits. He never moved, just stared at me with that cold, lifeless gaze. The whispers started then. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible, like a distant hum, a murmur in the back of my mind. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder. Come closer, I'm waiting, I can show you, everything. I tried to avoid the mirror, but it was impossible. I couldn't help but look at it, to see if he was still there. He was, always, standing, watching, waiting. His smile grew wider with each passing day, his eyes darker, more hollow. I couldn't escape him. One night, I found myself standing in front of the mirror again, my eyes locked on his reflection. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to touch the glass. I didn't want to, but my hand moved on its own, as if it had a mind of its own. My fingers brushed against the surface. I froze. The reflection of the man started to shift. His mouth moved. "Join me," he said, his voice a low, rasping whisper that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I recoiled, but my hand was stuck there, pressed against the glass, unable to pull away. His face contorted in an expression of pure malice. His mouth opened wider, wider than any human mouth should be able to, and a shrill, high-pitched scream erupted from him. The force of it shook the room, rattling the walls, the furniture, and then, his hand reached out from the mirror. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. His fingers curled around the edge of the frame, pulling himself out of the glass, his twisted, distorted form beginning to emerge. I screamed, but no sound came. I tried to pull away, but my body was frozen, paralyzed by terror. I could see his face, now so close I could feel his cold breath on my skin. His eyes, his eyes were no longer empty. They were black holes, sucking in every bit of light around him. And then, just as his fingers touched my shoulder, everything stopped. I woke up the next morning in bed, drenched in sweat. The mirror was gone. The room was normal, but I still feel him sometimes, watching, waiting, and every time I pass by, a reflective surface. I see him in the corner of my eye, the man in the mirror, and I know he's still waiting for me to look again. My name is Emily Hayes, and I should have never stepped foot inside that chapel. I had been traveling through the countryside, taking photos for my travel blog. It was supposed to be a quick stop, a hidden gem some locals mentioned, a chapel, deep in the woods. The kind of place that would make for a perfect, haunting photo. The sort of place that felt like it hadn't been touched in centuries. I parked my car at the edge of the forest and followed a narrow, overgrown path. The sun was setting, casting an eerie glow through the trees. The deeper I walked, the more oppressive the silence became. There were no birds, No rustling of leaves, just a heavy stillness that seemed to press in on me from all sides. Finally, I reached the chapel. It was small, crumbling, and overrun with ivy, but it stood there, ancient and defiant, in the middle of the woods. The door was ajar, as if waiting for me. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, the light from the fading sun filtering through the broken stained glass windows. There was an altar at the front, covered in cobwebs, and the pews were long abandoned, rotting from years of neglect. But what caught my attention was the large wooden door at the back of the chapel. It was sealed shut, its hinges rusted and broken, but it called to me. It was as if someone was waiting for me on the other side. I wasn't sure why, but I found myself walking toward it. The closer I got, the colder the air became, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I reached for the door, pushing against it, and to my surprise, it creaked open. Beyond the door, the world seemed to fall away. I stepped into a room that didn't belong, a dark, stone chamber, completely out of place in the small chapel. There were no windows, only a single, dimly flickering candle in the center of the room. The walls were lined with old, weathered books, and the floor was covered in a strange, unfamiliar symbol, a circle, drawn with what looked like chalk, but stained dark with age. And in the center of the room, a figure stood, a woman. Her face was obscured by a veil, her long, flowing white gown billowing around her, despite there being no wind. She didn't move, but her presence was overwhelming, like a weight pressing against me. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped forward. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the thick air. The woman remained still, no response. But then, slowly, she turned toward me. Her eyes, they were not eyes at all, black pits, endless and hollow, where eyes should have been. They seemed to reach into my soul, pulling me closer, urging me to come forward. I tried to back away, but my legs refused to move. I was frozen, caught in her gaze, unable to tear myself away. "Help me," she whispered, her voice like 1,000 voices echoing in the chamber. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last, the sound deafening in the silence. And then, as if the world itself was bending, the figure moved. She came closer, but not with her legs. She floated, gliding through the air, her veil billowing like smoke. She reached out a hand, her fingers long and skeletal, covered in dark, cracked skin. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Her hand touched my face, cold, freezing cold, like ice. "I am trapped," she said, her voice now a low growl, echoing around me. "You must release me." And then the floor beneath me cracked open. I fell, plunging into darkness, the air thick and suffocating. When I woke, I was back in the chapel, lying on the cold, stone floor. The door to the hidden room was gone. The room itself had vanished, leaving only an empty chapel behind. But I knew what I had seen. I had seen her, the woman in the veil, and she was waiting for someone to free her. Now, every time I close my eyes, I can feel her cold touch. I hear her whisper, calling me back, and I know that someday, she'll come for me. My name is Daniel Grant, and I shouldn't have taken that shortcut through the woods. It was late in the afternoon when I decided to cut through the forest behind my house. The sun was dipping behind the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the tangled underbrush. It was a route I'd walked 100 times, but tonight, something felt different. The trees towered over me, their branches thick with leaves that whispered in the wind like they were speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The usual sounds of birds and animals were absent, replaced by a strange, oppressive silence. I didn't think much of it, The woods had always felt strange at night, but I'd been through worse. Still, as I walked deeper into the thicket, an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't long before I noticed the first sign that something was wrong. The trees seemed to be changing, the trunks bending at odd angles, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes. The path, which should have been clear, was slowly becoming obscured by overgrown ivy and thorns. I turned to retrace my steps, but the path I had come from was gone. The trees had closed in behind me. Panic surged through me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It was just a trick of the mind, I told myself. Maybe I'd veered off course. I took another step forward, trying to make sense of my surroundings, but the trees seemed to shift again, their branches swaying in a way that defied the wind, and that's when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the words were too clear, too deliberate. Help me. The voice was soft, almost a sigh, but it was there. A woman's voice. I froze. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, like the very forest itself was speaking. It wasn't just one whisper. It was thousands, overlapping, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. Help me, it repeated, louder now. Help me. I didn't know what to do. I was lost, disoriented. The woods stretched out endlessly in every direction. My heart pounded in my chest as the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. And then I saw her. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, just out of reach of the fading light. She was pale, almost translucent, her hair long and wild, her eyes wide with fear. Please, help me, She whispered again, but her mouth didn't move. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was something wrong about her. Her gaze was cold, hollow. It was like she wasn't really there, like she was a part of the forest itself. I took a step toward her, my feet moving against my will. I couldn't stop myself. Don't come closer, the voice warned, but it wasn't the woman's voice. It was the forest, the trees. She'll take you too, but I couldn't hear it. I couldn't stop. My body was moving, drawn toward her, like a moth to a flame. When I reached her, I reached out to touch her, but my fingers passed straight through her like smoke. She was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt, and then everything went black. I woke up on the forest floor, the whispering gone. The trees had returned to their natural state, their branches still and quiet. The night was peaceful, too. Peaceful. I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning. My watch showed that only a few minutes had passed, but something was wrong. Time didn't feel right. As I stumbled out of the woods, the voice returned one final time. Next time, you won't leave. I don't go near those woods anymore. They still whisper sometimes, but I don't listen. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I think I hear her calling my name. My name is Nathan Cole, and I should have never stepped into that house. It had stood at the end of Ashbury Lane for as long as anyone could remember, a towering Victorian ruin, its windows like empty eyes staring out at the world. No one knew who had built it. No one knew who had last lived there. All they knew was that it waited. I was a real estate photographer, hired to document the property for a developer who wanted to tear it down. I had done 100 abandoned houses before. So when I arrived that cloudy afternoon, I thought it would be just another job. I was wrong. The front door creaked open before I even touched it, as if the house was expecting me. Inside, dust floated in the stagnant air, and the wooden floors groaned beneath my boots. The furniture was still there, chairs pulled back from a long decayed meal, a grandfather clock frozen at 3:12. It was as if the family had simply walked out one day and never returned. I lifted my camera and took my first shot. The flash burst in the dim light, illuminating the grand staircase ahead, and someone was standing at the top, a tall figure, motionless, featureless. I dropped the camera, my heart slamming against my ribs. When I looked again, the staircase was empty. My breath came in short gasps. Just a shadow, I told myself. Just my mind playing tricks on me. I pressed on, taking more shots. The house was eerily silent. No wind, no outside noise. Just an oppressive stillness that clung to my skin. Every room I entered felt occupied, as if someone had just left before I arrived. Then I reached the bedroom at the end of the hall. The air inside was heavier, colder. The bed was neatly made, dust thick on the covers, but the closet door was ajar, revealing a blackness too deep, too unnatural. A whisper slithered through the silence. Closed the door. I spun around. No one was there. My hands trembled as I raised the camera again. I snapped a picture of the room. The flash went off and the closet door burst open. A figure lurched out, arms twisted, mouth stretched in a silent scream. Its eyes empty, black pits locked onto mine. I stumbled backward, but my feet wouldn't move fast enough. The thing crawled toward me, its limbs cracking with every unnatural movement. My breath caught in my throat as it reached for me. Fingers, long and gnarled, skin stretched tight over bones that didn't seem human. Then the whisper returned closer. Leave. My paralysis broke. I ran, slamming into the door frame as I fled down the hall. The air around me felt heavier with each step, like the house itself was trying to hold me back. The stairs stretched longer than before, the front door impossibly far away. I could hear footsteps behind me, faster, closer. The house didn't want me to leave. I lunged for the door, gripping the handle with trembling hands. It wouldn't budge. A cold hand closed around my wrist. I turned, then saw nothing, but I felt it. The pressure, the presence, the house itself breathing against my skin. With one final desperate pull, the door flew open, and I tumbled onto the porch. The moment my feet hit the dirt outside, the air changed, the weight lifted. The whispers stopped. The house stood silent once more, as if nothing had happened. I checked my camera later, hoping, praying that I had imagined it all. But there was one last photo I didn't remember taking. A picture of the front door, and in the doorway, a shadow, waiting for me to return. My name is Oliver Grayson, and the Hollow Point Lighthouse should have been abandoned. It stood alone on a rocky cliffside, battered by relentless waves. The last keeper had vanished decades ago, leaving behind an untouched room and a logbook, filled with increasingly erratic entries. People in town spoke of lights flickering in the tower at night, despite no one living there. They whispered of a voice that called sailors to the shore one they couldn't resist. I didn't believe in any of it. I was a historian, fascinated by lost places and their secrets. That's why I found myself climbing the crumbling steps, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick fog rolling in from the sea. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of salt and decay. The walls were damp, the furniture left as it had been when the last keeper vanished. A thick layer of dust covered the floor, except for a single trail of footprints leading up the spiral stairs. My chest tightened. I had just come in. No one else should have been here. A distant creak echoed above me. Footsteps. I swallowed my fear and followed the stairs, my boots heavy against the iron steps. The sound continued above me, slow and deliberate. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became, until my breath fogged in front of me. Then I reached the lantern room. The massive glass windows overlooked the endless black sea, waves crashing violently against the cliffs below. The great light, that should have been dead for decades, was glowing. A figure stood beside it. At first, I thought he was a man dressed in the old lighthouse keeper's uniform, standing unnaturally still. But when he turned, my stomach dropped. His face was wrong, hollow. His eyes were pits of darkness, and his mouth, it was moving, yet no sound came. Then, the whisper, "Jump." The word curled around me, as if whispered directly into my skull. My vision blurred, my mind clouded with a sudden, overwhelming urge. The cliffs below seemed inviting, the waves almost welcoming. I stepped forward. Jump. A hand gripped my wrist. Ice cold. I gasped as I snapped back to reality, stumbling away from the edge. The figure was gone. The lighthouse was dark. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. I refused to look back at the tower, but as I drove away, I saw it in my mirror. The light was still shining, and I swear I heard my name in the wind. My name is Jason Holloway, and I barely made it out of Blackridge Mine alive. I was never one to believe in ghost stories, but everyone in town avoided that mine like the plague. They said the last crew who worked there vanished overnight, their bodies never found. People claimed to hear the screams of trapped miners echoing from deep inside, even though the tunnels had collapsed decades ago. I thought it was all nonsense, just another tale to keep kids from wandering into danger. So when my friend, Mark, dared me to explore it, I grabbed my flashlight, my camera, and my pride and went in alone. The entrance was easy enough to squeeze through, a narrow gap between fallen rocks. Inside, the mine was colder than I expected, the air stale and thick with the scent of damp earth. Rusted tracks lined the tunnel, leading deeper into the darkness. Every sound, my footsteps, my breathing felt amplified, like the walls were listening. I took a few photos, the flash bouncing off the jagged walls. That's when I saw the first sign that something was wrong. There were footprints, fresh ones. They weren't mine. A chill ran down my spine. The mine had been abandoned for years. No one else should have been here. But the prints were deep, like someone had been running, or being chased. I kept going, swallowing my fear. I just needed a few more shots, then I'd get the hell out. Then I heard it. A pickaxe striking stone. Rhythmic, distant. I froze, listening. The sound echoed from deeper within the tunnels, too far for anyone living to be down there. My flashlight flickered as I took another step forward. Then came the whisper, "Keep digging." My stomach twisted. I wasn't alone. I turned to leave, but the tunnel behind me had changed. The entrance was gone, just solid rock where an opening had been. My breathing turned ragged. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. I ran deeper into the mine, searching for another way out. The tunnel stretched endlessly, walls pressing in tighter. Shadows shifted where they shouldn't. My light dimmed, struggling to cut through the darkness. Then I saw them, dot figures, half buried in the rock. Their faces twisted in silent screams, arms reaching outward, fingers fused with stone. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. Then, just beside me, a voice whispered, "Join us." A skeletal hand broke free from the wall, fingers scraping toward my arm. I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but suddenly I was outside, gasping in the night air. The mine was silent behind me, as if it had never called to me at all. But when I checked my camera later, my blood ran cold. The last photo I had taken wasn't of the tunnels, it was of me, covered in dust, my eyes hollow, my mouth open in a silent scream, and behind me hands reaching. My name is Ethan Carter, and I never should have entered Blackwood Asylum. It started as a dare, one of those stupid challenges that seem harmless until they aren't. The asylum had been abandoned for decades, left to rot at the edge of town, wrapped in rumors of unspeakable horrors. People said the patients never left, even after death. They spoke of shadows moving behind broken windows, whispers carried by the wind. I never believed in ghosts. Not until that night, armed with only a flashlight and my phone. I squeezed through a gap in the rusted gate and stepped onto the overgrown grounds. The air was thick with decay, the building looming above me like a corpse refusing to rest. Friends had chickened out at the last minute, leaving me to explore alone. Fine by me. Inside, the asylum was worse than I imagined. Hallways lined with peeling wallpaper, shattered glass crunching under my boots, and an overwhelming sense of wrongness. My footsteps echoed, the sound swallowed by the building's emptiness. I recorded everything, narrating for my so-called brave friends who would watch later. Then I heard it. A whisper. It slithered through the silence, distant yet clear. My heart pounded. Just the wind, I told myself. But the air was still, no breeze. I followed the sound, my flashlight flickering as if protesting my decision. The corridor stretched endlessly, doors hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream. My breath caught when I passed a room labeled Ward C. The door creaked as I nudged it open, revealing rows of rusted beds. Restraints dangled from them, swaying gently, though there was no draft. A scraping sound. I spun, light shaking. The farthest bed. Something moved beneath it. My throat tightened as I stepped closer. The whispering returned, growing louder. Overlapping voices speaking in a language I didn't understand. My flashlight dimmed, flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me whole. I fumbled for my phone, hands trembling. A cold breath kissed the back of my neck. I wasn't alone. I turned, heart in my throat, and saw them, figures in hospital gowns. Their eyes hollow voids, mouths stretched wide as if screaming without sound. The whispers became a deafening roar. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out, only that I found myself outside, gasping for air, my phone clutched in my shaking hands. The screen was still recording. I pressed play. For the first minute, it was just my breathing. Then the whispers, growing louder. And then my own voice, though I never said the words. He belongs to us now. My name is Daniel Hayes, and I should have never checked into the Holloway Grand. The hotel had been abandoned for nearly 30 years, yet it stood eerily intact, an architectural ghost frozen in time. Locals avoided it, whispering about disappearances, strange lights flickering in the windows, and guests who never checked out. It was all nonsense, I thought. Just another urban legend. I was a photographer, drawn to places like this, forgotten relics of the past, perfect for my collection. When I found my way inside through a shattered side door, I was met with a strange stillness. The lobby was covered in dust, but the furniture remained untouched, as if waiting for guests who would never arrive. The chandeliers above, though, grimy and broken, still held the memory of grandeur. I clicked my camera, capturing the eerie beauty of decay. The flash illuminated the room for a brief second, long enough for me to see a figure standing near the reception desk. I spun around, nothing. A trick of the light, I told myself, but my skin prickled with unease. I pressed on, climbing the grand staircase to the upper floors, my boots kicking up dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The air was thick, suffocating. Then I heard the bell, the old reception bell, from the lobby below. A single ding. I froze. There was no wind, no one else inside. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it must have fallen, somehow. But my gut told me otherwise. I reached the second floor. The hallway stretched into darkness, lined with doors, some slightly ajar. I took a few shots. Rooms left in mid-abandonment, beds still made, suitcases covered in layers of dust. It was as if the guests had simply vanished. Then, from the end of the hall, a whisper. "Come, see." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. It was a voice, distant yet clear. My camera felt heavier in my hands as I aimed it down the hallway. The flash fired. A woman stood in the doorway of room 209, pale, dressed in a tattered housecoat. Her face was turned away, but her body was rigid, unnatural. I blinked. She was gone. Panic clawed at my chest. I forced myself to walk toward room 209, my breath shallow, each step heavier than the last. The door creaked open at my touch, revealing a room frozen in time, a suitcase still half packed, the bedsheets rumpled, as if someone had just risen from sleep, and the bathroom door was open. I didn't want to look, but something pulled me forward, my camera in hand. I lifted it and clicked. The flash filled the room and she was there, not standing, but hanging. A rope around her neck, head tilted unnaturally, empty sockets where her eyes should have been. Then, the whisper, close. You're staying the night, aren't you? The bathroom door slammed shut. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out, but I swear, I heard footsteps behind me, all the way to my car. When I checked my camera later, there were no pictures of the woman, no photos of room 209 at all, only one image I didn't remember taking the reception desk, and behind it, the guest book. My name was the last one signed. I'm Alex, and I used to believe the stories. Everyone warned us about the forest, but we didn't listen. We thought we were invincible, that nothing bad could happen to us. But that was before the Black Branch, before the ritual. It started, innocently enough, a weekend camping trip with my closest friends, Sarah, Jack, and Emily. We had heard the stories growing up, the ones about the strange happenings in the forest near the old mill, but we laughed them off. Just superstitions, we told ourselves. After all, the old mill had been abandoned for decades, and nothing seemed amiss when we went to check it out. The forest was dense, the trees twisted and gnarled, casting long shadows across our path as we made our way deeper in. The silence of the place was deafening. The only sound was the crunch of dry leaves beneath our feet. We didn't know it then, but that silence would soon become the loudest thing we'd ever hear. Around noon, we arrived at a clearing, where the mill once stood. The building was a crumbling shell, its walls covered in vines and moss, windows boarded up. We set up camp just outside the ruins, laughing and talking about the adventures we had planned. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if something was watching us from the trees. Sarah was the first to notice it, a blackened branch hanging from one of the trees near the mill. It looked out of place, twisted and sharp like a broken limb. Its bark was pitch black, almost as if it had been scorched. I don't like that thing, Sarah said, her voice uneasy. It doesn't belong here, Jack scoffed. It's just a tree. Get over it. But Emily and I felt it too. There was something wrong with that branch. We tried to ignore it, but it was hard. Every time we turned our heads, it felt like it was closer, leaning toward us. As the night fell, we gathered around the fire. The forest around us seemed to come alive, its whispers carried on the wind. It wasn't just the rustling of leaves anymore, it was as if the trees themselves were speaking. Sarah kept glancing at the black branch, her anxiety growing. I think it's the branch, she said. I think it's cursed. Jack laughed again, but his laughter didn't reach his eyes. Even he seemed to feel it now. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air, but they didn't seem to last. They burned out too quickly, as if something was draining the life from them. Then, without warning, the branch creaked. The sound was low, almost like a whisper, but it was enough to send a chill down our spines. The blackened limb seemed to stretch, its jagged edges twisting unnaturally. I watched in horror as it began to move toward us, as if it was alive. And then, the air grew cold, naturally cold. We could see our breath. We need to leave, Emily said, panic creeping into her voice. But it was too late. The branch reached down, its tip dragging through the dirt like a snake searching for prey. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Something held me in place. Something invisible. Something that made every movement feel sluggish, as though the air itself was thickening around me. Jack stood up, his eyes wide with terror. "What is that thing?" The branch began to pulse with a dark, sickly glow. Then, we saw them figures emerging from the shadows of the trees. They were humanoid, but wrong. Their limbs were too long, their faces distorted and blank, like masks of pure darkness. They were silent as they moved closer to us, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. The branch, now fully alive, whipped through the air, its blackened surface cracking and splitting. I felt the air vibrate as if it were about to shatter. Emily screamed and tried to run, but she stumbled, falling into the fire. The flames exploded into a blinding inferno, but it didn't seem to touch her. She didn't scream anymore. Everything was happening too fast. Jack was pulled into the darkness, his body jerking violently as if he was being torn apart. I could only watch in horror as the figures dragged him away, their movements jerky and unnatural. I turned to Sarah, but she was gone. The trees had swallowed her up, and I was left alone, the cold creeping into my bones, the whispers growing louder. I ran, but the forest was endless. The branches reached out to grab me, their gnarled fingers brushing my skin, pulling me back. The black branch was always there, always closer, its dark power suffocating the life from everything around it. By the time I found my way out of the forest, I was alone. I don't know if I was meant to escape, or if something in the forest had let me go. But I know one thing for sure. Whatever it was that was guarding that cursed place didn't want us there, and I'm not sure it's done with me yet. I'm James, and I have no idea why we thought going into Hollow Creek was a good idea. We were just looking for something to do on a lazy Saturday afternoon, but instead, we found something we should have left alone. We had all heard the rumors in school, tales from older folks who knew better. Hollow Creek was known as a cursed place. Supposedly, long ago, people from the town had gathered there for a strange ritual, and now the land was haunted. Everyone avoided it, except for kids, like Usiang, naive, and hungry for something thrilling. It was Mark who first suggested we go. "We'll be legends if we find something out there," he said, grinning like it was all a joke. Emily, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes. But in the end, we all agreed. What harm could it do? We entered the woods just after noon, sunlight filtering through the leaves. The air smelled fresh, but there was an underlying dampness that seemed to cling to everything. The path leading to the creek was narrow, the trees growing so close together they almost blocked out the light. We joked about how creepy it looked, but deep down, none of us really laughed. We walked for what seemed like hours, the forest growing darker and quieter the deeper we went. Eventually, we came to the creek. The water was dark and still, like it was hiding something beneath the surface. Mark was the first to step closer, squatting at the edge to peer into the murky water. "That's it," he muttered. "It looks like something's down there." None of us wanted to get too close, but curiosity got the better of us. That's when we noticed the stones. They were scattered along the creek's edge, black and smooth, covered in strange symbols. Emily knelt to examine one, her fingers tracing the markings. "Are these ... carvings?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Before anyone could answer, a chill wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves. It felt wrong, like the whole place had just come alive. Mark, trying to seem brave, stood up and kicked one of the stones into the water. It sank quickly, disappearing into the darkness below. "That was dumb," Emily said, looking at him like he was an idiot. But then, there was a sound. A low, guttural hum that seemed to come from the creek itself. We all turned in, unison, trying to locate the source. The water rippled, as if something had disturbed it, but there was nothing there. A figure appeared on the other side of the creek. It was tall, its form cloaked in shadows, and it stood motionless, watching us. Its face was obscured, but we could all feel its eyes on us, deep and endless. Emily was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it lifted its hand, revealing a small object, a dark, twisted stone. It held it up, as if offering it to us. "That's the offering," Mark said, quietly, his eyes wide. "It's real. The ritual." Before we could react, the figure stepped into the creek, its feet not disturbing the water at all. It crossed effortlessly, as though the creek didn't exist. "What is it doing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure moved closer, stopping just at the edge of the circle of stones. It placed the twisted stone on the ground in front of it, and then stood, motionless once more. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the air, the trees, and even the ground beneath us. Suddenly, the earth trembled beneath our feet. We all stumbled, and the trees around us began to sway, as if caught in an unseen storm. The ground cracked open, and from the depths emerged a strange, twisted form, part human, part something else, crawling its way from the earth, its eyes glowing an unnatural green. We all froze in terror. The figure reached down, touching the stone it had placed. As soon as it did, the creature rose, towering over us. It was more terrifying than anything I'd ever seen, and it was coming straight for us. "Run!" Emily screamed. We didn't need any more encouragement. We bolted back the way we came, tripping over branches and roots, our breath ragged with fear. But as we ran, the sound of the humming followed us, growing louder and louder, as though the earth itself was chasing us. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, the noise stopped. The air cleared. The trees no longer seemed to loom over us like silent watchers. We didn't stop running until we were far from Hollow Creek, and when we finally did, we didn't say anything. We didn't need to. We all knew what we had seen. We had interrupted something ancient, something that wasn't meant to be disturbed. I don't think I'll ever forget the look in that creature's eyes. They weren't just eyes. They were portals to something else, something far darker. And I know, deep in my gut, that Hollow Creek isn't done with us. I'm Leah, and I don't think I'll ever forget the night we crossed the line, the night we found something we weren't supposed to. I wish I had listened to my gut, but I didn't. And now, it's too late. It all began when my friends and I decided to explore the Ashen Hollow, a place spoken of only in whispers. Everyone in the village knew about it, but no one dared go near it. The story said it was cursed, a place where an ancient ritual had been performed long ago. It was rumored that anyone who entered the hollow after sundown would never return. Of course, we didn't believe any of it. We were young, invincible, and bored. So, when Mark suggested it, we all agreed. We arrived at the forest's edge just as the sun was setting, the last rays of light fading behind the trees. The air was colder than usual, and the forest seemed to hum with a strange energy. But we laughed it off, stepping into the thick underbrush and pushing forward. The deeper we went, the stranger it felt. The trees grew more twisted, their branches tangled in impossible shapes. The path seemed to narrow the further we walked, as if the forest itself didn't want us there. We finally reached the hollow, a clearing surrounded by ancient stone pillars. In the center stood a large, cracked stone circle, its surface engraved with symbols I couldn't make out. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and the ground beneath us felt spongy, almost alive. "This is it," Mark said, his voice low. "This is where it happened." I wasn't sure what he meant by it, but I didn't have time to ask before he began to gather dry leaves and branches, preparing for a fire. Ellie, on the other hand, wandered over to the stone circle, tracing the symbols with her fingers. She looked at me and shrugged. "Could just be old carvings," she said, though her voice didn't sound as confident as her words. We gathered around the fire, its flickering light casting long shadows against the trees. At first, it felt peaceful. even a little magical, like we were the first to discover this hidden place. But then, the temperature dropped, the flames of our fire flickered, and a strange, hollow sound filled the air. It wasn't wind or animals. It was a noise that seemed to come from the ground itself, a low, vibrating hum. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath us. "Did you feel that?" Ellie asked, her eyes wide. Before anyone could respond, the stone circle in the center of the clearing began to glow. A faint red light seeped from the cracks in the stones, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. Mark froze, his face palling. "I didn't do that," he muttered. "That wasn't me." The hum grew louder, and from the darkness between the trees, I saw something move. At first I thought it was an animal, but as it came closer, I realized it wasn't. It was a figure, tall and thin, cloaked in shadows, its face hidden in the darkness. It moved toward us, gliding over the ground without a sound. Then it spoke. The voice was low, guttural, like something that hadn't spoken in centuries. "Leave," it whispered. "You've awakened the ritual." The words seemed to freeze the air around us. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. We all stood frozen, unable to move or speak. The figure stepped into the light, revealing its face pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural glow. Its lips curled into a cruel smile. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed. That's when everything fell apart. The stone circle began to vibrate violently, the ground splitting open as if the earth itself was being torn apart. Mark was the first to scream, his voice cutting through the air. He turned and ran, but the ground shifted beneath him, and he stumbled, falling into the crack that had opened. Ellie screamed next, trying to pull him back, but something reached out from the darkness, grabbing him by the legs and pulling him into the hole. The figure, still watching, never moved. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but I was paralyzed by fear. The air around me thickened, and I could hear whispers, countless whispers coming from the ground. The trees, the air itself, they were all saying the same thing. "Leave the hollow, or stay forever." I didn't know what they meant, but I didn't want to find out. The world around me seemed to spin as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The ground still shook, and the trees seemed to stretch toward me, reaching out like long, bony fingers. Finally, I broke through the edge of the clearing, stumbling into the forest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. When I finally made it back to the village, I found that Mark and Ellie were gone. No one believed me when I told them what had happened. The only thing that remained was the hollow, its whispers still calling in the wind, waiting for those foolish enough to enter again. I haven't been able to sleep since. I hear the whispers in my dreams, feel the eyes watching me in the dark, and I know, deep down, that Ashen Hollow hasn't forgotten us. I'm Marcus, and the story I'm about to tell you is one that still haunts me every night. It's a tale of how curiosity led my friends and me to something that should have been left alone. It all started with a dare. We were a group of college students, and we'd heard about an old ritual that took place deep in the woods, hidden from civilization. They said it was an ancient tradition, a ceremony performed by those who worshipped the spirits of the forest. The ritual supposedly granted those who participated great power, but at a terrible cost. Naturally, we thought it was all just superstition, but when Jake found a map, we couldn't resist. We wanted to see if the stories were true. The map led us to a remote part of the forest, an area so dense with trees that it seemed untouched by time. The sun had already begun to set by the time we reached the clearing, and there, standing in the center, was a massive stone altar, worn and weathered by centuries of neglect. Surrounding it were symbols, carved into the ground, and a ring of stones. It looked ancient, a place lost in time. "This is it," Jake said, grinning like he had just won a prize. "The ritual spot. Let's do it." We were nervous, But we had come this far, and no one wanted to back down. Ellie was the first to step into the circle of stones, followed by the rest of us. We didn't know exactly what we were supposed to do, but we had found a few rituals online, passed down by other curious souls. We followed them as best as we could. The wind picked up, rustling the trees as we began to chant the words we had found at first. Nothing happened. We laughed nervously, but then the air began to grow colder. The trees around us seemed to sway unnaturally, and for a moment, I could swear I saw movement in the shadows. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Suddenly, a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the clearing. The ground shook beneath our feet. The altar cracked open, and from within, a thick, dark fog began to rise. I could hear whispers, low and menacing, coming from all directions. The fog started to take shape, forming a figure, a tall, thin silhouette, standing just outside the circle. Its features were indistinct, but I could feel its presence, watching us, waiting. "Guys, what did we do?" Ellie whispered, her voice trembling with fear. None of us could answer. We were frozen in place, too terrified to move. The figure in the fog took a step forward, its outline sharpening, and with each step, the air grew colder. The whispers turned into voices, distant but clear, calling our names. "Marcus," the voice said, soft and cold. "You shouldn't have come." I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. I could see the fear in my friend's eyes as the figure advanced, its shape becoming more defined with every step. "I told you, it was real," Jake whispered, but it didn't sound like the confident tone he had when we first arrived. Now, he was just as scared as the rest of us. The figure stopped just outside the circle, its dark eyes staring at each of us in turn. It didn't move, it didn't speak, but I felt its gaze on me, like it was waiting for something. The air grew thick, suffocating, as if the forest itself had turned against us. Then, without warning, the figure reached out, extending a long, bony hand. The moment it touched the edge of the circle, the stone beneath us cracked, and the ground beneath us began to shift. The fog enveloped the clearing, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. "Run," I shouted. We all bolted, running blindly. Through the trees, the mist swirling around us. But no matter how fast we ran, it felt like we were going in circles. The trees seemed to close in on us, and the voices never stopped, following us, taunting us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we stumbled out of the forest. Our clothes were damp, our hearts racing, and our minds were numb with fear. We didn't speak to each other. We didn't have to. We all knew that whatever we had disturbed in those woods had followed us, and it wasn't going to stop until it had what it wanted. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard something at my window, soft tapping, like a finger drumming on glass. I got up to check, but when I opened the blinds, there was nothing there. I thought it was just my imagination, but then I saw it, a dark figure, standing across the street, staring at me with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. It hasn't left me since. Every night, it's there, waiting, watching, and no matter how far I run, I know it will always find me. My name is Caleb, and I've seen things in the woods that I can't explain, things I wish I could unsee. This is the story of how my friends and I came to know a terror that doesn't belong in this world. It was a weekend trip, nothing more than a hike through the local forest, which we'd been to a dozen times before. Me, Ellie, Mark, and Jake, just a group of friends looking to have some fun before the summer ended. We packed our gear, grabbed our flashlights, and set off into the woods, eager for a quiet evening under the stars. But there was one thing that changed everything. A few miles in, we stumbled upon a place we'd never seen before, a clearing with a large tree standing in the center. It wasn't like the other trees around it. It was taller, its bark blackened as though scorched by fire, and its roots twisted into unnatural shapes. There was a large symbol carved into the trunk, a circle with an intricate design inside, the lines sharp and deliberate. I didn't know what it meant, but it gave me an uneasy feeling, as though the tree was watching us. "What is this place?" Ellie asked, her voice nervous as she stepped closer to the tree. "It doesn't look like any of the trees around here." Mark approached the tree, running his fingers along the carved lines. "It's probably just some old symbol. Maybe someone did it a long time ago, but I wasn't so sure. There was something off about it, something wrong." The air felt thick around the tree, like it was holding its breath. We were about to leave when Jake noticed something odd. A small, dark object was hanging from one of the branches. It was hard to see, but as we moved closer, we realized it was a necklace, a pendant shaped like an eye. Jake reached up to grab it, and that's when the whispers started. At first it was so faint that we thought it was the wind, but then it became louder. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sharp, insistent, almost like a warning sent a chill down my spine. "Did you hear that?" Ellie asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't like this," I muttered, taking a step back. Before anyone could say anything else, the ground beneath us trembled. The air grew cold, and the whispers turned into a low, guttural growl, like something was waking up. We turned to run, but the forest itself, seemed to come alive. The path we had walked down just moments ago had disappeared, replaced by a maze of thick branches that blocked every way out. "We're trapped," Mark said, panic rising in his voice. Jake's face was pale, his hand still gripping the necklace. "I think I made a mistake." As the whispers grew louder, something began to emerge from the shadows. A figure, tall and skeletal, its body wrapped in what looked like vines and leaves. Its eyes glowed faintly, as though reflecting the moonlight, and it moved toward us with an unnatural speed. "Run," Ellie screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the growl that now filled the air. We tried to break free from the maze of trees, but they seemed to shift around us, closing in on all sides. We could hear footsteps behind us, dragging, slow, deliberate. The figure was getting closer. I turned to look, just in time to see it lunge toward Jake. The necklace fell from his hand, but it didn't matter. The creature's long, twisted fingers wrapped around his throat, and in an instant, he was gone, swallowed up by the darkness. Ellie screamed, her voice cracking, as we ran, not caring about the path anymore, just desperate to get out. But the forest wouldn't let us go. We ran in circles, lost in its depths, the whispers now louder than ever. It was like the very trees were closing in on us, suffocating us. Eventually, we stumbled out of the forest, gasping for air, our hearts racing. We didn't speak to each other on the way back to town. The whole experience felt like a nightmare, but I knew it was real. The mark on the tree, the whispers, the figure in the shadows, it wasn't just some old legend. It was something far darker. We never spoke of it again. None of us ever returned to that forest. But every now and then, when I close my eyes, I can hear the whispers again, calling me back. And sometimes, when I look into the mirror, I swear I can see a faint mark on my skin, a symbol like the one on that tree. Maybe it's just my imagination, or maybe the woods are still watching us. I'm Jason, and I wish I could forget what happened in that forest, but it's something that will haunt me forever. It all started as an innocent camping trip. My friends Ben, Olivia, and Charlie and I were looking for an adventure. We had heard rumors about a place deep in the woods, where an ancient ritual was supposed to take place every full moon. The story was that a tree, a hollow one, was the gateway to a forgotten world. Of course, we didn't believe any of it. It sounded like a tale designed to scare kids, but we were wrong. It was late in the evening when we made our way into the woods. The forest was thick with trees, their branches twisting and stretching above us, blocking out most of the moonlight. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the only sounds we could hear were our footsteps crunching on the dry leaves below. After a few hours of walking, we reached the clearing, and there it was, the hollow tree. It was an enormous oak, the center of the clearing, with a dark, gaping hole in its trunk. The tree looked ancient, its bark cracked and peeling, and its twisted roots spread out like fingers reaching for the ground. "This is it," Ben said, his voice filled with awe. "It's the tree from the stories." "Are you sure?" Olivia asked, a hint of fear in her voice. "This doesn't feel right." Charlie laughed, though it was forced. "Come on, Olivia. It's just a tree. Let's do the ritual and head back." We had no idea what we were doing. The ritual was simple, or so we thought. According to the story, we needed to gather around the tree, touch the trunk, and say the words we'd found online. Supposedly, something would happen. What? Exactly, we didn't know. We stood in a circle, hands on the tree. The air felt charged, like static electricity. Ben began chanting the words we'd written down. At first, nothing happened. We waited, looking at each other in confusion. But then, there was a sound faint, at first, like a low hum. The ground beneath us trembled. The hum grew louder. We looked around, panic creeping in. The air grew colder, and the tree started to shake. I could feel something shifting in the air, something ancient, something not right. Suddenly, the hollow in the tree began to glow. A faint eerie light emanated from the center, casting strange shadows on the ground around us. I tried to pull my hand away, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if the tree had a grip on me, holding me in place. "Jason, what's happening?" Olivia screamed. I couldn't answer her. My eyes were locked on the glowing hole in the tree. The light grew brighter, and I could hear whispers, faint at first, then growing louder. The voices weren't human, they sounded ancient, as if the tree itself was alive and speaking to us. And then, it happened. The ground split open in front of us, and something emerged from the earth. It was like a shadow at first, a dark mass rising from the soil, but as it grew, I saw it more clearly. A figure, tall and twisted, covered in black, cracked bark. Its face was a patchwork of wood and leaves, but its eyes were like pits of pure darkness. It reached out toward us, and I felt a pull, a compulsion to move closer. My feet took a step forward, against my will. The others screamed, but I couldn't hear them. The whispers from the tree grew louder, and the figure's eyes bore into me, cold and empty. Ben tried to run, but the shadow grabbed him. His scream echoed through the forest, sharp and agonizing. In an instant, he was pulled into the ground, disappearing without a trace. "Ben," Olivia screamed, but it was too late. The figure turned toward Charlie. He was frozen in terror, unable to move. The shadow reached out with long, twisted arms and touched his shoulder. His body went limp, as if all the life had been drained from him. Olivia and I managed to break free of whatever force was holding us, and we ran, our hearts pounding in our chests. The whispers followed us, and the sound of footsteps, something moving just behind us, never ceased. We stumbled through the woods, not stopping until we reached the edge. The trees were no longer silent. They whispered in a language I couldn't understand, as if they were laughing at our fear. We made it back to town, but Ben and Charlie were gone. We never spoke of it again. Olivia and I tried to put it out of our minds, but I can still hear the whispers when the wind blows through the trees dot, and sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods, I think I see that hollow tree in the distance, waiting for me to return. I'm Rachel, and this is the story of how I almost lost my life and my mind in the woods. It started innocently enough. My friends and I were looking for a thrill on a warm autumn evening, and we'd heard about a strange ritual that supposedly took place deep in the forest, not far from town. A local legend, whispered in hushed tones, told of people who ventured into the woods to perform a ritual and disappeared without a trace. It was said that those who returned were never the same. I wasn't sure whether to believe it, but the others were all in. There were 4 of us. Me, my childhood friend Sam, his girlfriend Lily, and our adventurous friend Nick. We met at Sam's house and made our plans in secret, agreeing to go into the woods after dark. The ritual, according to the legend, was simple. At midnight, we had to stand in a circle around an ancient oak tree deep within the forest, hold hands, and chant a phrase in an unknown language. Afterward, we would be given a gift. Some said it was power, others claimed it was knowledge, but no one knew for sure because no one had ever come back with an explanation. We trekked through the woods, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. The moon was high, casting eerie shadows through the trees. As we ventured deeper, the silence grew unsettling. The usual night sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, absent. At long last, we reached the oak. It was massive, its trunk gnarled and twisted, the branches stretching high into the dark sky. There was something off about it, though. It seemed almost alive. Is this it? Sam asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Lily looked up at the tree, a mix of awe and fear in her eyes. This is where it happens. We stood in a circle around the base of the tree. I had a knot in my stomach, but Nick insisted we do it. Come on, Rachel, don't be a chicken, he teased. We're here, so let's just do it. Reluctantly, I nodded. We joined hands, and Nick started chanting the words he'd memorized. From the old book we found, the air grew cold, the wind died down, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. Then, I heard it a whisper, faint but clear, coming from the depths of the woods. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it was just the wind, but the others heard it too. Did you hear that? Sam asked. Before anyone could respond, the whisper came again, louder this time. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to us, in a language I couldn't understand. The ground beneath us trembled, and the trees seemed to sway, even though there was no wind. Nick continued chanting, but his voice faltered. I don't think we're supposed to be here. Then, the whisper turned into a growl, deep and guttural. The trees around us began to rustle, but not from the wind. Something was moving. The forest seemed to come alive, twisting and reaching toward us. My hand tightened around Lily's, and I could feel her trembling. Suddenly, the whisper stopped. Silence. I looked around. The air was heavy, thick with an unnatural presence. The shadows seemed to grow, encroaching on our circle. Then, a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, and its face was hidden in the shadows. I couldn't see its features, but I could feel its eyes on me, like it was studying us. Double quotes. Who? Who are you? Sam's voice shook. The figure didn't answer. It just watched us. The air grew colder, and I felt a pressure in my chest, like something was suffocating me. Without warning, it moved. In an instant, it was standing right in front of us, its face still hidden. I could feel its breath cold and unnatural on my face. I tried to step back, but something held me in place. Run, Lily whispered, but we couldn't move. The figure raised a hand, and suddenly, the forest around us erupted with voices, thousands of them, all speaking at once. The trees groaned, as though in pain, and the ground beneath us started to crack. I thought we were going to die there, but then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The forest fell silent again. The only sound was our heavy breathing. We stumbled back to the edge of the woods, shaken and terrified. We didn't say much on the way back, but I could feel the weight of something following us. The woods weren't the same anymore. They were darker, more oppressive, and I could hear it whispers, just faint enough that I thought I was imagining them. But I knew I wasn't. That night, we all had nightmares. The whispering voices, the dark figure, the feeling of being watched, it haunted us. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe the ritual worked, and the forest claimed us in some way. But ever since that night, the whispers have never stopped. I hear them in my sleep. I hear them when I walk alone. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear, I see that figure watching me from the shadows. I'm Oliver, and I wish I had never followed my friends into the woods that night. It all began on a dare. For weeks, rumors had been circulating about an ancient ritual that took place deep in the forest. Supposedly, anyone brave enough to follow the ritual would receive unimaginable power, but at a steep price. Of course, being the curious group we were, none of us could resist. We had to see for ourselves. There were 5 of us. Me, my best friend Jake, his girlfriend Sophia, and our 2 other friends, Liam and Hannah. We were all gathered at Jake's house late one night when the subject came up again. "Do you guys really think it's real?" Liam asked. "I mean, it's just a story," Sophia chimed in. Jake's eyes lit up. "No one's ever tried it. If we're the first, we'll be legends." Hannah laughed nervously. "Legends, or dead. Quit being such a buzzkill," Jake shot back. "It'll be fine. We'll go in, do the ritual, and come back with the stone." And that's exactly what we did. The bloodstone was said to be an ancient relic hidden in the woods, a stone that could grant immense power to whoever possessed it. The ritual was simple. Find the stone, say the words, and take the stone back to the circle where it was originally placed. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the trees as we hiked deeper into the forest. The air grew colder with each step, and the usual sounds of the woods were eerily absent. There was a heavy silence, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. We eventually came upon a clearing, and in the center, we saw the bloodstone. It was a large, crimson-colored rock, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The ground around it was marked with strange symbols, as though someone had carved them into the earth long ago. "This is it," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. "This is where it happens." Liam hesitated. "Are we sure about this?" "Of course, we are," Jake snapped, stepping forward and kneeling beside the stone. "We do the ritual, and we're done." We all gathered around, looking at the stone in a mixture of fear and excitement. The ritual was simple. All we had to do was say the words, and the stone would grant us power. Jake was the first to speak, his voice low and chanting in a language I didn't understand. The air around us seemed to shift, the ground trembled, and a strange humming filled the air. Then, everything went wrong. The ground cracked, and a low guttural sound rose from the earth. The stone began to ooze blood, spilling out and covering the ground around it. Sophia screamed, but it was too late. The trees began to move, twisting toward us like fingers. The whispers started, faint at first, but then louder, overlapping in a chorus of voices. Liam tried to run, but he stumbled, as if something was pulling him down. He looked up, eyes wide with terror, as the blood from the stone rose into the air and wrapped around him. With a final scream, he was dragged into the earth, vanishing without a trace. "Help!" Sophia cried, but we couldn't help. The forest had already claimed him. We tried to escape, but the trees closed in, blocking our path. The blood followed us, creeping through the forest. The whispers were everywhere. Hannah collapsed to her knees. "We shouldn't have done this." Sophia and I tried to flee, but the forest wouldn't let us. We could hear the blood, feel it crawling behind us, following us. When we finally reached the edge of the woods, we looked back. The bloodstone was still there, glowing faintly, but it wasn't just a stone anymore. It was watching us, waiting. I haven't been able to shake the feeling that something is following me ever since that night. The forest has claimed one of us, and I fear it won't stop until it has the rest. My name is Lily, and I regret ever stepping into those cursed woods. It all started with a dare. My friends, John, Claire, and Marcus were always into challenges, and when they suggested we hike into the forbidden forest at midnight, I thought it would be just another thrill. The forest had been the subject of countless rumors, but no one believed in the stories. At least, I didn't, not at first. The trees were massive, their branches twisted in unnatural ways. The deeper we went, the darker it became. The air smelled thick, like moss and damp earth. There was an uneasy silence surrounding us, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or rustle of leaves beneath our feet. But even those sounds seemed too loud, echoing through the forest as if it was alive. Listening. John led the way, his flashlight bouncing off the trees. "We're almost there," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "The circle's just beyond those pines." I hadn't asked what circle he was talking about. It didn't matter. I was more interested in the dare than in the details. But as we reached the edge of a small clearing, I felt a sense of dread settle over me. The ground was marked with old, faded symbols. They were carved into the earth in a way that looked deliberate, almost as if they had been placed there by someone or something intent on leaving a mark. At the center of the symbols, there was a pile of stones, arranged in a circle. It didn't seem threatening at first, just a strange, old ritual site left behind by who knows what. Claire stepped forward. "This is it. This is where they say it happens. The ritual." "What ritual?" I asked, my voice shaky now. John grinned. "The one where you summon the spirit of the forest. People say it grants wishes, but only if you do it right." Marcus snorted. "Yeah, and only if you're foolish enough to try." I didn't believe in any of that, but something about the place made my skin crawl. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. A cold breeze swept through the trees, but it didn't help with the warmth creeping down my back. Before I could protest, John knelt down, pressing his hand into the dirt at the center of the stone circle. "It's easy," he said. "We just repeat the chant, and the forest will give us what we want." I wanted to turn back, but the others seemed so eager. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But as John began to chant, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The wind picked up, swirling around us like a vortex. It howled through the trees, louder and louder, until it felt like the forest itself was alive, watching us, waiting for something. Claire and Marcus joined in, their voices blending with John's in a strange, rhythmic hum. And then, there was silence. Nothing happened. For a moment, I thought it was over, just another stupid game. But then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but then it grew louder, more distinct. The trees seemed to shift, their branches moving as if they were reaching out. The whispering grew, the voices blending together, overlapping in a chorus of unintelligible sounds. "Stop it," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This isn't funny." But it wasn't funny, not at all. The ground beneath us trembled. I felt a cold, dark presence wash over me, like the very earth was alive, crawling with something ancient and evil. The stones at the center of the circle began to glow, an eerie green light emanating from them. The whispering turned into a chant, the words unfamiliar, ancient, too old for any of us to understand. "Lily, help." John's voice came through the chaos, but when I looked at him, he wasn't there. Neither was Claire or Marcus. The circle was empty. The only thing left was the whispering, constant, all-consuming. I felt my body freeze, as if the forest had me trapped in its grasp. The trees loomed over me, their twisted shapes casting long, dark shadows that seemed to move on their own. The wind howled, and the whispering grew louder, filling my head with voices, too many voices, speaking in tongues. I ran as fast as I could, but the whispers followed me, growing closer, like they were right behind me. I stumbled through the trees, the branches scraping against my skin, but I didn't dare look back. By the time I made it back to town, it was already dawn. I couldn't explain what happened, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, it hadn't let me leave the forest untouched. I haven't seen John, Claire, or Marcus since that night. They're gone, vanished without a trace. No one believes me when I tell them, but I know the truth. The forest got to them, just like it tried to get to me. If you ever find yourself near the whispering pines, don't follow the voices. Don't even step foot in that cursed place. Because once the forest has you, it won't let you go. My name is Ethan, and I'll never forget the night we stumbled into the woods. It all began when my friends and I decided to go camping in the old forest outside town. There were rumors, whispers of strange things happening out there. Some said it was cursed. Others claimed to have seen things in the trees that no one could explain. But to us, it was just an adventure waiting to happen. We were a group of 4. Myself, Sarah, Jake, and Emily. We had been friends since childhood, and this trip was supposed to be our way of celebrating the end of high school. The plan was simple: hike into the woods, set up camp, tell stories by the fire, and maybe even get a little scared, just for fun. We set up camp near an old clearing deep in the forest. As the night fell, we built a fire and sat around it, talking about everything and nothing. The firelight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees surrounding us. We joked about the rumors about the strange figures people had seen and the odd symbols. Some said they found carved into the bark of trees. It wasn't long before Sarah suggested we play a game. "Let's see if we can find the ritual site," she said, half joking, half serious. "Ritual site?" Jake laughed, clearly not taking her seriously. "What? Like a witch's den?" Sarah grinned. "Maybe. There are supposed to be some old ritual spots in the woods, abandoned for centuries. Some say if you find one and do the right thing, you can summon something ... special. It was just a game, right?" But the look in Sarah's eyes was unsettling. "I'm in," I said, eager to prove I wasn't scared. We grabbed our flashlights and ventured deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, the trees towering over us like ancient guardians. We walked in silence, the only sound being the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a twig. After what felt like hours, we found it a clearing with a large, circular patch of dirt in the center, surrounded by trees. At the center of the circle was an intricate design, carved into the earth with sharp precision. It looked almost like a symbol, something old and foreign. "That's it," Emily whispered. "This is the place." The moment she said that, the air seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and the forest became unnervingly still. It was as if the entire woods held its breath, waiting for something to happen. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a strange excitement. "We do the ritual," she said, kneeling down in the center of the circle. "We just have to say the words." I froze. There was something about the way she spoke, something too confident, too sure of herself. "Sarah," I started, but it was too late. She muttered something under her breath, the words unfamiliar and harsh. A low hum filled the air, vibrating the ground beneath us. We watched in horror as the symbol in the dirt began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter and brighter, until it was blinding. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, throwing us off our feet. The trees around us creaked and groaned, their branches twisting unnaturally, as though they were alive. A figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in shadows. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence sent a wave of terror through my chest. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my mouth. The figure moved closer, its steps slow and deliberate. "Sarah, what did you do?" Emily cried, her voice breaking, but Sarah didn't answer. She was staring at the figure, her eyes wide with awe, her lips parted as if in a trance. The figure reached out, its hand long and skeletal, and I felt a wave of cold wash over me. I could feel its gaze on me, cold and empty, like it was reaching into my very soul. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving nothing but a chilling silence. We didn't speak as we stumbled back to camp. We didn't need to. The terror was in our eyes, in the way we moved, in the way we looked at each other, knowing that whatever had been summoned was still out there, waiting. The fire was still burning when we returned, but it felt wrong, as if it had been feeding off our fear. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we packed up and left, never to return. I've never told anyone what really happened out there, but every night, I still hear the sound of footsteps in the woods. And I know whatever we summoned that night is still waiting for the right moment to find us again.